Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines, coming to you from the West Coast. Josh Lander, joined as always by my guy on the East Coast, Nate Weitzer. We are recording this right as that Pacers game just wrapped up. A lot of what happened in that game is a lot of what we told you would happen in that game. Hopefully you took that Pacers team total over and them to win that game big time against the Hornets as they did. We are going to await, obviously, the game for that Boston Celtics-Wizards matchup, and then we'll be able to give out that gift card for whomever is able to guess that Bradley Beal plus Jason Tatum total in the comments. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to the video. We are going to jump into those Western Conference play-in games here in just a second. And as always, if you do need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find all those local listings in your area. Nate, let's get into those lines real quick and jump into those games.
Yeah, first off, we have the second billing game, which is the Spurs +4 at Grizzlies. The total sitting at 222 right now, and the Spurs are about +150 as money line underdogs. And then we have the game that everybody wants to watch. The Warriors +5 at the Lakers. Steph Curry on fire going into the defending champion's house. The total is at 219, and the Warriors +180 as underdogs. Lakers just jumping up to -220 to win. Obviously, people very confident that with LeBron and AD and Schroeder back, they can take care of business. So, Josh, how do you feel about that game?
Yeah, I feel honestly like it's pretty 50-50 in terms of where we're seeing people lay action, maybe even a little bit obviously more on the Warriors getting those points. I think people are probably betting on chaos from the standpoint that we don't really know exactly how healthy LeBron is after that little baby ankle roll at the end of their last game of the season against the Pellies. Anthony Davis is not as hurt as he's been. I think he's been pretty healthy. He's played 4 of their last 5. They won all 5 to end the season. He played 4 of those just sitting out against Houston, which was obviously a game that they felt comfortable sitting him and still being able to win. In that time frame of those 5 games, which LeBron only played 2 of their last 5, they are doing what they do on defense, 8th in opponents' points per game. They're top 5 in terms of opponents' 3 points attempted and 3-pointers made, which is really big as they're limiting 3-point attempts. And they're 2nd in rebounding. And then they're 5th in percentage points scored in the paint. AD doing his thing. Golden State has been really bad against, allowing points in the paint, especially in the last, to end their season at the last 5, 21st in the league in that, and opponent points in the paint scored. So, AD, as we said, in those 4 games, he's been averaging about 37.5 minutes a game, telling me that he's plenty good to go. That's how many, at least, probably maybe up at a few minutes in the playoffs, depending how much they need him. Probably see him play 40 to, in that game against the Warriors. And then, what he's done specifically in those games, also 26 points, 8 boards, 4 assists. And he's averaging about 10 free throw attempts a game in that time frame, which is very relevant to, the sort of flow of this game, as we'll see, the Warriors give up the most free throw attempts as a team this season, about 26 free throw attempts for their opponent, fouling about 22 times a game. The Lakers depend heavily on that, especially AD. They go to the line 6th most in the NBA. And then when you look at AD specifically versus the Warriors, in the last 3 games that he's played, 2 last season and 1 this season, he's averaging about 22 and 11 and 4 in those games with 12 free throw attempts a game. And specifically against Draymond Green, actually in the last 8 times he's played Draymond, his stat line is pretty incredible. 26 points, almost 15 boards, 4 assists a game. When the smaller Draymond is guarding him, he's not having as much success when AD plays that small ball 5. This team is pretty unbeatable as far as the rest of the league goes, and definitely for what the Warriors are able to bring. So that brings me to a couple of things that I just want to point out that I like. Still, I love the Lakers -5 right now, or sitting at that line. I feel very comfortable about it. And then the team points for the Lakers, attacking that at 112. I do think that this is more likely to be a blowout for the Lakers than anything. So I feel comfortable betting that they can get 112. But I do think Steph is going to be, kept to a pretty good, definitely not the torrid pace that he's been on. Let's put it that way. Whether Steph gets, nice numbers around 30 points, I still, you look at what he's done against the Lakers this year, 23 points a game in 3 meetings, 5 assists, 34% from 3, and they're only allowing him to pull the ball from 3 about 9 times a game against them. He just shot 22 career high attempts, to clinch that game against Memphis and get that 8 seed, which was a great performance. But he's not even going to get those shots off in my opinion, against the Lakers this way. So I'm actually looking at his unders on DraftKings, specifically under 36.5 points. I believe he's at 48.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined. Those both will get you about -110 on your money. And then, if you're feeling frisky, 5.5 3-pointers made. If you take the under there, that's +120. Obviously, not as likely to happen, considering he's just going to be firing away. So I don't feel quite as comfortable about that one, but I do feel pretty good about his unders. And then AD, one I really, really like is him to be the leading point scorer in this game. If you do think he'll get up to about 25, 26 points, as I do, then if they're able to limit Curry, like I also think, that leads to me liking that +600 at DK for me putting any money on AD being the leading point scorer in this game.
Yeah, I mean, though limiting Curry would be maybe holding him to 32 or so. So that's still pretty ridiculous. But yeah, I agree that I definitely like that the points prop, particularly under 36.5. I don't think that they let him go off like that. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope really leading the charge, holding him to those rather inefficient numbers in the earlier meetings. Really, the last 4 times the Warriors have faced the Lakers, their offense just ground to a halt against that great Lakers defense. There was that one weird game where they came back and won it by 2, but they were getting smoked in that game as well. With Anthony Davis, the most switchable big in the league, I mean, they can put him at the 4 still and then just really pound the Lakers down. The Lakers can pound the Warriors with Drummond, with Harrell. I think that we've kind of seen a sleeping giant. I mean, it's not really a hot take here. Obviously, the Lakers are loaded with size and talent, but I think this game is just so important for them to get those 2 extra days of rest, that they're not messing around looking like at the Clippers like, oh, let's try to juke who we play in the first round. No, they just need to win and get in the bracket and then rest up. So absolutely like the Lakers to win. I like to maybe angle for their fourth quarter defense. There's a market on DraftKings, first to 20 points in the fourth quarter, and the Lakers are -120 there. I mean, they're the number 1 fourth quarter D in the league, so that's definitely a good one. On FanDuel, you can just get a LeBron double-double +150 in the win. I like LeBron to go over 8.5 assists at even money. And yeah, you talked about AD. One thing that's kind of a weird shot, but rather than top point scorer, AD gets the first bucket and the Lakers win is +750. That's maybe worth a stab. You never know, but he can go right to work on the low block. But a little more reliable. I like him to get 3 assists for +120 on DraftKings. I think the Warriors will try to get the ball out of his hands a little bit, and he can still make plays, as you saw with the stats against Draymond recently. Yeah, so then we have the Memphis Grizzlies and the Spurs. The Spurs, I mean, the first thing that jumps out here is the Spurs were 5 games behind the Grizzlies. According to the way they set up the play-in tournament last year, they wouldn't have even earned a shot. So this is kind of ridiculous. And hopefully that spurs Memphis on for a little motivation to say, like, why are you guys even here? But really what I'm looking at is the Spurs' inability to stop anybody lately. They are the 27th defensive rating team in the last 15, and on the road in their last 10, they're 3-7. They're 24th in net rating. On the season, they give up the 3rd most paint points on the road. And Memphis, for the 2nd year in a row, is leading the league in paint points. They have Jaren Jackson Jr. back. They've gone over in 4 straight home games against the Spurs. They crushed the Spurs in the last 2 meetings after they got a long break due to COVID-related things. I think they can pull away from the Spurs, but I don't necessarily trust that spread situation. The way Memphis has kind of fluctuated at home lately, but they have handled their business against bad teams, right? They're 23-11 against teams with losing records, and they do have a winning record, and the Spurs just 12-29 against winning teams. So I do trust Memphis to win. I like the money line, but more so I like the over, and if you want to parlay them together and get +200, I think that's a great way to get some juice there. But I absolutely trust the over. I think the Spurs, I've said it before, just like their defense is take the ball out of the basket and go score more efficiently than you. And it's going to go through DeMar DeRozan. who has a 28% usage rate, a 121 individual offensive rating, and is averaging 23.5 points since the start of April. And that happens to be when the Spurs' horrible defensive numbers started peaking. So looking at that, that's my main prop that I'm thinking is DeRozan to lead the game in scoring at plus 145. DeRozan to get over 36.5 points, rebounds, assists. He's distributing now a ton for the Spurs, expecting to take over. And just a value one to look at is that Jaren Jackson Jr. hasn't really been unleashed, so to speak. He really just came into the lineup a few weeks ago. And he's just getting 23.5 points, rebounds, assists. I think he definitely gets over that. And there's this thing called the alternate points line on FanDuel for the playoffs, where you can juice his points all the way up to 20 and get plus 200, or instead of taking his regular points prop at 16.5, I think he can get there.
Yeah, I love the opportunity to tease things up and get a little bit more bang for your buck if you feel confident about something. Personally, I'm looking at Ja Morant as something I feel a little bit more comfortable with, just because specifically of what he's done this season against San Antonio. You would think that someone like DeJounte Murray would be able to have a little bit more, ability stopping someone like Ja with his length, but 25 points, 9 assists, 3 games this season against San Antonio. So not exactly fluky. He's been able to do it, for the majority of his career at this point against the Spurs. So, a couple of his props you might consider is over 20.5 points. It's just minus 118 at FanDuel, but I do think Ja to get at least 20 is a really good bet. 21, not unlikely at all. And then, as you mentioned, actually you did talk about him, but specifically his points, rebounds, and assists, as we mentioned, with his assist total at about 9 against the Spurs this season, and having Jaren Jackson back, as someone else to be able to dish the ball to, I do think, 34.5 points, rebounds, and assists. You could see him easily get that in just his points and his assists alone. So, really looking to target Ja specifically in this one, and then definitely agree with you on the total going over in that game.
Yes, sir. And Jaren Jackson Jr. 2.5 threes is one more thing to look at. The way the Spurs have been giving up those threes.
That shot, man, is crazy. It looks like how I used to shoot when I was like in middle school and could barely get the ball at the basket. But at any rate, that is all the time that we have. Make sure that you are liked and subscribed to that page. Jump in the comments. We'll be coming back with you guys after these playing games once we know a little bit more about the 2 games that we have left in each conference, once we know the winners and losers. Obviously, the winners of the 7-8 matchup in each round in each conference will be headed to the playoffs no matter what. And then we'll be monitoring those other 2 games, as we said. So we'll be back with another one for you guys. And as for tonight, happy betting.